Hey everybody, it's Professor Snart here. Hopefully you had a good Halloween and are having a good fall so far. Beautiful colors on the leaves, or the trees. Okay, so due dates. It's November 1st when I'm recording this. Where are we here? So we're just finishing up our significant objects assignment, both the writing of the piece, fairly short still, and then the reply component. Again, this is kind of like a mini workshop that we're testing out where we write something, share it within a group, and get some feedback. And that preps us for our first major workshop in the course, fiction or short fiction, basically writing a short story. So I've talked at length in a previous video kind of about the short story part of that, but I just wanted to review again kind of the feedback piece, or providing feedback within your workshop group. So it can be a little bit awkward sometimes to give feedback to people that you maybe don't feel like you know very well, and you're not seeing them in person, so you're just typing a comment in a document. There's some practical things that we can talk about too, but it's definitely worth reviewing the how the workshops work link, both in terms of just the technical aspects of, again, creating your document, posting it, setting the sharing settings correctly so people can access and edit it, or not edit it, but comment on it. But it's the how to provide feedback part that I want to focus on here. So again, the golden rule applies. You as an author want to get substantive, meaningful feedback from the people in your group, so that means you also have to provide that as well. And remember that the grading for our class, especially the workshops here, is really, it's less about the so-called quality of the writing that you're doing, because again, the whole point of workshop is to submit work that we know isn't finished. We know it's not perfect. That's exactly why we want to get feedback. The bulk of the grade is really coming not from the writing of that piece of fiction that you're doing. It's really coming from the quality of the comments that you're providing to other people, because that's really the most meaningful part. So again, really important that we have just the technical part set up. So we have the discussion board, the workshop groups. Everyone will be in a group, right? You'll have that thread created. You can go in, post the URL to your document, make sure it's shared correctly so that all the people in your group can get there and can comment. We're going to use the comment function in Google. Just, highlight a piece of text and you'll see the little comment button show up. You should be signed in to Google, so we'll be able to see your sign-in name here. That's really important for me. Again, as I grade these, I look for who's commented where and what have you had to say. So I need to know like who's who. If your Google name is something that's not going to be obvious to me, make sure that when you do your comment, you even add your name to the comment so I can see whose comments are whose. And then you click the little comment button, and there your comment is attached to the document. As an author, make sure that you don't go in and resolve comments just yet. There's no mechanism in our course necessarily to revise what we're doing. We just don't really have time for that. But even if you do go in and make some changes or revise, don't resolve or get rid of the comments, because when I'm grading it, I need to be able to see those, right? So make sure that, after the class or at some later date, once the grades are all done for this, you can certainly go in and resolve comments or make changes or do whatever. But for right now, for the time period, for a week or so after we're done with our short story workshop here, don't mess with the comments. I need to see those. Okay, but you're probably feeling, and maybe you even sense this doing the significant objects assignment, is it can feel weird to comment on other people's work. We're just getting to know each other, so you don't have personal kind of informal relationships with people necessarily. We don't have body language that goes a long way to making other people feel comfortable with what they're saying, especially if we're offering a criticism or a critique or a suggestion for improvement. So it's just that text on the page. So again, be careful with tone. And the mechanics here of providing feedback can really help set your mind at ease, I think. So there's some strategies for forming comments that are helpful. If you formulate it as a question, it can often feel more palatable than just a statement of this could be better if, or this would be better if, and then providing your suggestion I wondered if the title could be more specific, or I wonder if the dialogue here could be broken up and not so chunky, because we don't talk to each other in these long paragraph / mini novels. So, formulate it as a question. I wondered if, and then provide the insight. But also be careful to provide some options, right? Provide a suggestion for whatever you think could be better or improved. So don't just point something out and then leave the author to figure out what some suggestion might be. Doesn't mean the author is going to take your suggestion necessarily, but to have that example, that level of detail, is useful to the author, but it also shows that you've really thought through the comment. It's not just, oh, I'm reading this for the first time really fast, I'll just highlight a couple things and be like, this is great, or this needs work, or blah, blah, blah. So sure, there might be a lot of comments, but they're totally surface level. They're not very helpful. Again, avoid just correcting typos or making like grammatical suggestions. If you find those things, you can point them out, but those don't really count as comments. Those are just editing things, not revision kinds of things or higher order kinds of things. Certainly we can comment on what we think are successful moments in a work. We're not just pointing to problems or areas for potential improvement. But at the end of the day, while it feels good to get that feedback, what's most useful for us as writers, we just have to admit this, is getting that feedback about what didn't actually work that well. And again, that's why it's important to go in with the mindset that I am submitting this work in this unpolished form to get feedback to make it better. So you can't be defensive about your work. You have to be open to getting that commentary. And the truth be told, the problem that I find most often isn't that people are really mean and negative about their comments. Actually, the opposite is true. They're really like kind of cognizant of not providing too much what could feel like negative feedback or comments to work. So it ends up almost being like too celebratory, and we don't really, as the author, you don't end up getting much that you can actually work with. You might also feel a little weird about commenting on people's work because you're not a self-styled expert in the field. Well, we don't have to be. That's partly why I've offered a bunch of suggestions for like, how do you do this successfully? But at the end of the day, we as writers are writing for a kind of general readership, not a set of creative writing professors across the country, or certainly me, right? So you as the reader are the audience. So your reaction to the work is really the one that matters, not what some professional author or professor has to say. So ironically, you, even if you feel like kind of a non-expert in the field, that's exactly what we're looking for. So you should feel empowered to provide your opinion. Again, grounded in specifics, like my opinion might be this, but how could we work to actually make that better? And that's where you apply your knowledge as a writer, but also what you've learned in the class so far. So keep in mind the rules of creative writing. Keep in mind some of the things that we've learned. That's your basis for expertise, right? You do know something about creative writing, or at least I hope you do, right? So you do have something to share and say. So don't feel like just because you don't have a PhD in the field or have published 1 million short stories, that you're no longer allowed to like critique a work or have a reaction to a work. You are. You do. You can. We just want to be careful how we do that, because at the end of the day, we're all authors with our piece of work that's going to have a bunch of comments on it, and we don't want to feel like people have just been sort of mean-spirited about it. So somewhere here, yeah, right here, the model that I like to think about is that we're all generous readers. We're going to have things that are critiques, like I wondered if this could be better if you fill in the blank. But by the same token, we're generous, we're supportive of one another, and we have spent the time reading the work to figure things out. So if you're a reader and you're confused by a particular moment in a short story, before you just jump in and be like, comment, I'm confused here, fix this, make sure that you're confused because you've read it generously. You've read it a couple times. You've tried to figure it out. And the confusion is because maybe there's like a mistake. Maybe there's a wrong character name used, so it doesn't make any sense right here. I've seen that happen. People, they forget what they've named their characters, or they inadvertently call one person by the other name and then it switches back. So that's a legitimate problem where we're going to be confused as a reader, and the author needs to know so they can fix it. But if we're just racing through as readers, cold reading, and there's something that happens early that's actually explained later, We need to know that. So don't just cold read the thing and pile on a bunch of comments about how confusing it is, but it's only confusing because you haven't really tried as a reader. So we have to be careful about that. So again, we want to invest time in writing our short stories or whatever genre we're working in, but you have to invest time as a reader as well. So again, I'll let you read through the how the workshops work here in greater detail, but that also sort of points us back to our due dates. We really piled things on early on, doing like a couple of units per due date. That was precisely so we had time to really open things up here. So again, time to complete things, a couple of days to be providing meaningful feedback, and then turning around into our next units. So we have the luxury, quote unquote, of a little bit more time, again, relatively speaking, to really invest in producing good work, to entering into the workshop with the right mindset, like we want feedback, and then really thinking of ourselves as generous readers within our workshop groups to provide meaningful comments throughout the document, not just one big summative thing at the end. Meaningful comments, not just fixing typos or comma mistakes or whatever. And again, not just like 2 or 3 comments, but lots of commentary throughout the document, really engaging that piece of work in the way that we as authors want our work to be engaged with by our workshop group. Okay, so as always, if you have questions, concerns, you can be in touch with me. I'm going to start getting into grading the significant objects pieces, which, like I said before, is one of my favorite assignments that we do in the class. Really creative stuff comes out of that one. And of course, I'm really looking forward to reading the short stories that everyone produces for our first workshop coming up in a few days here. Okay, so take care, and I will talk with everybody soon.